From your house, that would be fun.
You are live.
Okay. This is Senate Transportation and we are resuming our testimony. We have Michael Grady from, Ledge Council, and Mike, you're on.
Good morning, this is Michael Grady, Legislative Council. I don't know which bill you want me to start with.
Whichever of the two of them that you'd like. I think the forestry operations
Okay.
piece might be best.
Sure, so you should have in front of you a draft number 1.2 with a February 24th date and a 2/11 p.m. time stamp.
This was printed on Tuesday, so it might be deep in your file, but if you want
Can
me
you
to
look
print
for me? And
another one.
I'm trying to look for. My iPad's out of power.
Oh, do you want to use the?
Draft one here, they don't have a number. Oh, that's 29 here, that's 46.
Oh, I found mine.
This is, that's 46. That's 46. Draft 1.2.
So it's on our website, right?
Yeah.
It is.
That's under.
I mean, my mom ran this. I don't know why.
You find it?
This is not what I'm.
Oh,
Oh, that's earlier.
all right, perfect.
Oh,
You
no.
guys want that?
All right. That was cookies.
Okay, so as everyone looking at draft 1.2,
Yep.
so in section 1, this is the purchase and use tax. And you were going to add language regarding certain equipment or clarifying the current purchase and use exemption for certain equipment used for forestry operations. The change that you had requested related to those motor vehicles, motor trucks, and you were concerned about providing an exemption for a vehicle that could then be used for personal use. Damien and I sat down with the chair and we looked at some of the registration thresholds for vehicles. There is a current registration threshold for 7,100 pounds or more loaded weight. And that is effectively the weight of a Ford F-350. And so to exclude anything less than that, which is more apt for personal use, this exemption is only applicable for motor trucks and motor vehicles with a loaded weight of 7,100 pounds or more. Then you wanted the department to have the ability to require a purchaser at the time of purchase to certify that a motor vehicle or other equipment that is exempt shall be used for forestry operations. You may have received an email from Dana Doran, the forest industry lobbyist, who pointed out that New York requires such a certification. The DMV shall publish guidance relating to the application of this exemption. That's effectively going to be a website direct. There's a definition of motor truck that's been added because it's not currently in the purchase and use chapter. And now you are making that distinction. Motor truck is not the same thing as a motor vehicle. And then section 3, you're moving into the sales tax. There's currently a sales tax exemption for motor vehicles that are subject to the purchase and use tax, but it has a provision that says that construction, earthmoving, logging, and motorized equipment that has not been registered as a motor vehicle has to pay that purchase and use tax. Well, you just exempted those, so you have to strike logging from that sales tax provision on page 2, line 12. And then there's this dynamic with certain equipment that goes on a vehicle that currently, and you'll see this, it's called auxiliary equipment on motor vehicles, whether attached prior to or subsequent to registration, is not exempt under the sales tax. Well, you're later on in this exemptions, you are exempting that type of equipment. So you have to say, except for that equipment under subdivision 51 of the section. And the industry does have some issues with that. So this will help clarify that type of equipment is exempt. Then on page 3, line 1, subdivision 51, amending the existing exemption from the sales tax for that machinery or repair parts used for forestry operations. You'll see that the semi-trailers, tractor truck trains, tractor truck cranes, and motor trucks and motor vehicles with a loaded weight of 7,100 pounds or more. So they only pay this if they're not paying the purchase and use tax. So, and again, the Department of Taxes may require the purchaser certify at time of purchase it's going to be used for forestry operations. Added a definition or cross-reference to the definition of motor vehicle and motor truck because they are not present in the sales tax chapter. Then the act would take effect on passage.
Why would we do it on passage and not have it done at a date certain? If they have to change anything within the departments.
I think the perspective is between the advocates who want something sooner and the administration who want to do, as the chair just suggested, respond and implement. So I think that's a policy question for you. There's no.
I would say in this particular case, I would fall on the side of the state because they're going to have to change forms and applications and those things. I would look for a date from them that they think this is accomplishable and not. I can't imagine if I have a purchase and use form that we pass this and bam, it goes into effect. I would want to give them enough lead time that makes sense. Whichever
No,
one.
go ahead.
And I would assume that they already had some form for the exemption of the other, it wouldn't be too much to sign. So maybe July 1st, start of the fiscal year is going to work for this, but I agree with the chair, but let's hear from DMV on the date. But I wonder in general, why are we doing a may and not a shall for the Department of Taxes and DMV on requiring the certification? Should that discuss?
That wasn't, it hasn't been discussed. So we're gonna let Michael tell us.
So I just think that the certifications can be difficult and they're not always complied with. And so for the purposes of enforcement, if the departments think they need one, if they think that there's misuse of these exemptions, they could require them.
The exemption is clear. It does have to be for forestry, but it's just whether that we happen to sign it.
Right.
I certify that.
Yeah.
So we're leaving it up to the administration and administrative.
And there is a certification currently in law for agricultural equipment, certain percentage of time. The retailer has to collect it, then they have to file it. They don't always do that. You got a new guy on the floor,
Right.
and so there's just some. Leave it to the discretion of the departments whether they're going to require the certification.
Right now, when you bought a new vehicle for forestry, you would pay the dealer the tax, but now the dealer would collect that. And the dealer wouldn't have to certify my stream.
Well, the dealer will, there will be forms, they will have to certify that they did not collect the tax because of.
Right, like all the other.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
But so just fundamentally, philosophically, I really don't like subsidizing through tax exemptions. It's just a bad way to do things. It distorts what we're doing, and it also costs us more money to do the administration of it. So my understanding of the reason why we're talking about this is that there were couple difficult years, right? Financially. It's
For the forestry.
For the forestry, and I do support the forestry industry very much, and I think that the exemptions that we already have for equipment that is not on the roads, that makes a lot of sense because they're not impacting the roads. But this is equipment that is on the road. There are other industries similar to this industry that have equipment on the road that they will pay tax for. Our transportation funds are in terrible shape. So making a decision to,
I think we're gonna get
Okay,
to, we're
so-
going
so
to
there's
ask
that.
Logan
Okay.
if we have estimates for cost and that. I would say they've had a couple of bad years in forestry. I would say that we've seen a huge shrinkage of the whole of the forestry industry and all of that. It's not unprecedented to, in agriculture, there are certain things that are taxed and not taxed to encourage that. I think your point is well taken, but I think, I'm sympathetic. For me, I would say that particular issue about the pickups. If I have an LLC that goes out and buys a pickup for everybody in the family,
okay, so that's.
So I'm
That's
trying
my
to,
general observation, and I would, my preference would be to just pay them,
yeah,
just give them a straight subsidy.
I hear that. We're trying to
Right.
bring you a draft that balances the concerns of members of the community.
Okay. And so then I just do have some specific things, like,
Yep, go
if we are
ahead.
gonna go that way. I think it should say, primarily forestry. It just says forestry, that it's used for forestry in the two places. And we might want to time limit, do this for 2 years and then check back. That would be reasonable, I would think.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Are you done?
Yes,
Two questions. Clarification on the 7,100 pound. You said, so 3,500 1-ton would qualify in a 3/4 ton would not. But my question is, I think that's what I heard. But you used loaded weight instead of unladen weight, right?
Yeah, this is the question I was going to pose as well, and Damien. No, I don't
Because
think
that's how the registration works. It's
Yeah.
unloaded.
yeah.
We're following that just.
So it's the, oh, I have to find Damien, so I know he
I
went.
thought it was unladen weight, but. So, yeah, 'cause my question basically is, I think you can load up a 3/4 ton so that the overall weight is probably over 7,100 pounds. So positive.
Right, and then I remember I've had this discussion before of why we do registration with the loaded weight, because it seems like it's easy just to say, like, I'm gonna carry cotton balls and not try anything. But
yeah.
We'd have to have a lot of cotton.
So when Logan posed the question to me, I posed the question to Damien. And he said, I would interpret loaded weight to be the equivalent of the gross vehicle weight rating. Except it does not include the combined gross vehicle weight rating of the vehicle and a trailer. The loaded vehicle weights that we came up with for 46 are based on the manufacturer's listed gross vehicle weight rating.
So that's not a loaded weight though. That's what well, I guess yeah,
But
it's what they
can.
can put it.
So it's a capacity.
Yeah.
Right, the capacity.
I don't know if it is the capacity. I don't know. I remember thinking it was weird before. I don't remember telling you the details.
No, you can.
Can you do a little more digging so it's a little clearer for us?
Sure.
We're just trying
Yeah.
to find a drawing line here.
No, I only ask because I agree with the concept of 1-ton vehicles and up. But I really,
Yeah,
like you, I think, don't want to see a whole bunch of 3/4 tons and half tons are out of the question, but.
Well, I actually look at this and say, so I've got a limited liability corporation that I've set up, and I go out and, I buy a bunch of pickups, and everybody in my family gets a pickup that doesn't pay the tax. And I'm using, I might use it some for work, but I might use it to go grocery shopping. And I just think that there has to be a line. Go ahead.
I realize we've kind of devolved into a committee discussion on this bill, but I did have a question for council.
Yep, go ahead.
So one of the pieces that you noted early on in our discussion, there was a little bit of unclearness for what was exempt and what wasn't exempt, and especially when we compare to other states that have just a very, hey, this is everything is exempt. There was a lack of clarity in Vermont. I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit more to that, because at the very least, I think we should resolve that.
So I think you've largely resolved that. When these exemptions were first enacted, people were going to DMV. And DMV was not providing the exemption for the auxiliary equipment on the motor vehicle. They were saying that it's separate because it could be separated, and because of that provision about the auxiliary equipment that I just walked through. I think what you are doing here addresses that,
Okay.
that lack of clarity.
Okay. Thank you. If we are not necessarily connected as a committee on moving this forward, that would be my bare minimum request.
Oh. Wendy.
Just, I don't know if I was clear on my specific thing on this, which is that it's in two places.
Yeah.
Where it says
Page 1.
shall
line
be
18.
used for forestry. I think it should say shall be used primarily for forestry operations. Or even like 90%, but it's probably too.
Yeah, I've got that down.
Okay.
That's-
Okay, thought I might have said it too fast. Thanks.
So we need a little more clarity on the 7,100 and where that line is. We need to hear from DMV what's a realistic time to give them forms, or it would seem to me it would either be a July 1st date start or a January 1st date start. In that, what's reasonable for them. And, you know,
You can't.
if, the Senator Harrison has, an amendment that she would like to add on, you know, this is a pilot, we'll have that discussion, if that amendment shows up.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, okay, is that?
Yes.
And my intent would be that we get that information and that Tuesday we come back, we vote on this.
Sure.
And do you have time to sit here and listen to Dana speak? Or should we go right to your next issue and then get you out of here?
I have to go actually write 2 bills for my 11 o'clock. So,
If Dana can wait, we will let you go right to your next issue.
okay. And I don't need to write them. I have to go and like
I
get them from the editor.
My last conversation with the other senator from Washington, the chair of natural resources, she gave me a broad view of where her committee was headed on this chloride bill, which I think directly affected what we might be interested in this committee around that bill. And that the conversation I had with her specifically was around municipal salt sheds and the covering of them. And she had indicated, and this was a couple of days ago, before she kind of segued out the door with some concerns about COVID. And she said she was going to relay that to you. So I was hoping that you could update us on where that is.
Yes.
And we could give you some instructions on.
So the Agency of Natural Resources came in and proposed several changes to S-29. I have a draft that I can give you, but I didn't get approval from Senator Watson to give it to you until 10/11. So when I go back to my office, I'll be able to send you that draft. I haven't voted on it, but she's agreed to circulate it to you. What ANR is proposing to do is to focus the program on commercial salt applicators and remove municipal applicators and address them through the municipal training that municipal employees already get from AOT and from ANR on road practices. As part of ANR's request, they want to remove the requirement to cover salt sheds.
For municipalities.
For everyone,
For everyone.
yes.
That we heard in testimony, that's not an issue for the state,
Not an
because
issue.
we were down to, if not one, basically zero on salt sheds, but only a couple on the sand
Yeah,
piece. So it really was not a big issue for them to, and do they have the time deadlines of 2030 and 2035 in what she's discussed?
so remember, it's removing all of that.
Okay,
That's all gone.
okay,
And what it replaces it is ANR is gonna recommend funding that may be available to municipalities to cover sheds, but there's no mandate to cover sheds.
Okay.
my last conversation with her 2 days ago, she indicated to me at that point that they had got what ANR had said. Her and I'm gonna share this with the committee, and she had said that there was some interest within her committee of saying around the municipal salt sheds, that if a community had a salt shed that was within a certain number of yards from a waterway or a lake or that they would still be in.
That is not what I had drafted, and that's not what she has approved me to give to you.
Okay. Because was 2 days ago before her last day here. That's what she had suggested. If a draft comes like that, what I would like to say to this committee is that we would want to hear from ANR what money is available, because if any of that showed up in this bill, I think what I would like to do is make sure that those communities are on a priority list to get any funding that's out there.
But remember, there's no mandate anymore, no requirement to cover, just a report on what funding municipalities could access if they wanted to cover. And there are a couple of different programs that I can think of.
Well, in that, what I would say to you, I'm not afraid to having a short discussion in here about, I think there's an issue particularly for small and medium-sized communities. And I think covering salt sheds might be a priority that we would like to see down. So any beefing up of that language around that, I personally would be interested in that. Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I guess I'm confused. Can I just explain what I believe is being said so that I
Yeah,
can
go
my
ahead.
comprehension? Okay. So you're saying there's nothing in the that says municipalities have to put on salt sheds.
Correct.
You're saying, originally, I thought your point was that you were saying you're good with that. That's the way you want the bill. And since that's the way you want the bill, we're not gonna take possession of the bill. But then you just said that you would want to beef up that section. So I guess I'm confused. Are you in favor of requiring the salt sheds or are you not in favor of requiring the salt sheds? And how would that implicate us?
I think
Bring
we're
the bill.
trying to get to what they're putting forward because it's not that.
Oh,
Days ago, the chair of the committee said to me that the compromise that they might put forward in that committee was anything near. Apparently, that's not what's being offered.
yes.
You do have some language in the natural resources bill, the way you've portrayed it to us, that does say something about funding for salt.
Yes, remember,
Okay.
and the chair was referencing in the previous draft that if a salt shed was a certain distance from surface water, it had to be covered by 2030, and otherwise it would have to be covered by 2035. That is totally gone and not in the draft.
That's too bad.
But for purposes of those municipalities that are looking voluntarily to cover, A&R is gonna recommend in a report funding available for such an activity.
Okay,
So I get that, and I think where we're going here is we might be looking in the committee, I'm not trying to put words in anybody's mouth, that when that language from A&R goes to municipalities and I'm sure they would be recommending grant programs or something, that maybe we prioritize uncovered salt sheds in that language, which probably isn't in the bill, but
It's not in the bill and
tough to do.
it's not tough to do, but there's a lot of discussion right now about access to some of those grants for things like the 3-acre stormwater permit. For some of the municipalities, they're looking at MS4 demands. I would ask that you just talk to A&R about whether or not
That's good.
putting a priority in for them right now is something that they support.
go ahead.
I would say, since it sounds like there's different opinions on this, I am not thrilled to hear that that's been taken out of the bill because our waterways being oversalinated is a problem. And it has long-term implications for the health of those waterways. I understand that municipalities are struggling financially to do anything. And I think that's a separate issue from making sure that we keep our environment and the quality of our waterways pristine. If anything, it makes me think that we should be increasing the town highway aid fund allocation so that they have more robust funding to do any of the work that they want to do. So I would just say, personally, I think it's better if we don't take the bill into our committee because I would be advocating for us to put that language back in, if anything. But I'm one of 5, and it sounds like there's 2 of 5 who would disagree with that. So it would be up to the other 2 members of the committee to advocate on their own. So I just feel like it's a discussion that we.
I'm at this point not sure what you're saying. I don't think anybody in here is advocating whether we take the bill in or not.
Oh, I
I
thought that's
think
what you
that
were.
the
Oh,
issue here is what's the language that A&R or that Natural Resources is putting forward. And if they do any of that, and they do have language about A&R and any funding, that whether or not we might say something about prioritizing salt sheds as something in the pecking order of what A&R looks like, whether we try to bump salt sheds up on that. And the question of whether it comes here or doesn't is totally a question up for the committee.
Yes.
And we haven't done any count on anything on this bill other than having a discussion about where we are. So, but
So I will go back to my office right now and send you the draft that Senator Watson approved for you to see.
that would be great. And if the members of the committee could take a look at that, we'll probably have a conversation about this Tuesday or Wednesday, the week we come
And
back.
I will get that information starting on 7100 date for the departments. And then looking at adding primarily.
And if there is anything more that comes up about the municipal salt sheds, you know what our interest is.
Yes.
And if there is an opening to prioritize that and it makes sense, I think we'd like to have a conversation.
Sure. Okay.
And at that point, I think Dana's still on.
Yes.
Yeah, if we could. You're on, Dana.
Good morning, Senator Westman, members of the Transportation Committee. Appreciate you having me on this morning. I know you've had a very busy morning and are looking forward to a well-deserved break. So happy to see you. Wish I could be in person, but I'm in the great state of Maine today. So Senator Westman, what's your pleasure? Where would you like me to start? Would you like me to review or give you our thoughts on the changes that Mr. O'Grady and the committee have been discussing in terms of the bill, the revised bill language?
I think that's the point we're at. You've seen the draft, you've heard the presentation, and now's your time to comment.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I appreciate listening to Mr. O'Grady and having a chance to review it. So this is many of the changes that Mr. O'Grady has made are in line with things that we had actually heard from the tax department. So just for background, and I believe I emailed this to the committee last week. So Sam Lincoln, Jed Lipsky, and myself met with Will Baker, who is legal counsel at the tax department last week, to get their feedback and input. So a couple of things, and again, I think I sent this on to the committee last week, but Mr. Baker was in agreement with the change that Mr. O'Grady made in the current section of law. So that's in section 2 under part 12 with that removing of the word logging. That was actually a recommendation of his to make sure that there was no ambiguity. The other piece of information that he advised was that when we had the bill originally constructed, you'll note going back to section 1, there was a inclusion of in forestry operations including. So that's on line 9 of the language that you're looking at. I don't know if you are there now at this precise moment. Mr. Baker's recommendation was actually to not have that in there. And I'll tell you why in just a moment, but it'll have implications on some of the language that Mr. O'Grady put in. So Mr. Baker's recommendation was actually to revert back to what is existing in statute. So it would say used for timber cutting, timber removal, et cetera, et cetera. And to do that in both section 1 as well as in section 3. And the reason why is from Mr. Baker and the tax department's perspective, using the term forestry operations, even though it's already used in statute, opens this up to more than just timber cutting, timber removal, transportation, etc. It could go to consulting foresters, and you could have a lot of others who may dabble in something related to forestry operations, but they are not directly involved in businesses that harvest wood, move wood, etc. So we are in agreement with Mr. Baker's interpretation on that. That would also, if it were removed there and reverts back to the original language, would also have an implication on the new language that Mr. O'Grady included regarding, and I'll just read on line 16, the Department of Motor Vehicles may require a purchaser at the time of purchase to certify that a motor vehicle or other equipment that is exempt under this section shall be used for forestry operations. We would say that ending shall be used for forestry operations should probably be taken out. And you just put a period after the word section, and do that in both section 1 and section 3. So other than that, we are in agreement with the inclusion of the 7,100 pound weight limit or whatever Mr. O'Grady comes back with for clarification. So I guess that's our assessment of the language and further recommendations for just some small tweaks.
Any questions? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Dana, for joining us again and for taking the time to work with the tax department and DMV to try to come to more of a compromise on this bill. I do hope that we move forward with it. And I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit to one of the points that Senator Harrison had brought up around subsidization. I don't know.
Subsidizing.
Yeah, it wasn't the right, I'm not using the right word, but you had a specific word you used that was to support a business outside of an exemption compared to
Just do it directly.
just doing it directly. Yeah. I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit to that point.
Sure. Yeah, I definitely heard Senator Harrison's concern. And Senator, you have one of our members in your district, Mike Hammer and Sons Logging. So I'm going to have Craig Hammer, who is Mike's son, who's now taken over the business, just reach out to you during break and you guys can have a quick conversation about this. I think that would be helpful. I think you brought up 2 points. One was the subsidization of a tax benefit versus other. And then I think you also mentioned the transportation over the roads and the pressure that will be put on the roads. So let me start first with the subsidization. So our experience, the logging industry's experience, whether it's in the Northeast or across the country, whenever there is a grant program, if you were thinking this would be better to be done by a grant program than a tax exemption, the grant program, if that was something you were thinking about, generally is something that we are not in favor of. And I'll tell you why. Because logging and trucking contractors are at the bottom of the supply chain, so to speak, there's tremendous pressure put upon them for the prices that they're paid for the raw forest products that they deliver. And mills are notorious for using anything and everything that they have knowledge of to reduce prices that are paid. Grants are one of those areas. We have seen that with federal grants. We've seen that recently with the pandemic assistance for timber harvesters and haulers that came out of 2020 and 2021. Because it's public information and they know the companies that receive the grants, they actually use that information to lower prices. It's price fixing in its worst form, but it's very hard to prove. So we actually we dissuade the use of grants wherever we can and would rather have this tax exemption to try to provide relief, because you can't look up specifically exactly which company got what, how they used it, etc. So I want to provide that information in terms of our perspective. I want to go into the roads use, but I also want to respond to any questions you might have.
Yeah, that's really, I appreciate that. Thank you. So it's basically because it's less transparent. So it's harder to find. I've been wondering about big companies that have, I believe they have their own loggers and mills. How, I'm thinking your folks are more independent loggers, right? Who sell to mills.
Correct.
So are there mills who or companies that are consolidated with both the logging and the mills?
There are probably only a handful, I would say, in the state of Vermont that own both logging infrastructure, trucking, and their manufacturers. And I would say, you know, as you brought up today, having the guidance created, I think that's vital. You know, we would advocate that those companies need to separate. You need to have separate businesses with separate business incorporations with the Secretary of State's office. As well as federal tax ID numbers. I mean, I think that's the only way that you can ensure integrity and accountability.
Right, so if we wanted to and so those folks probably don't have the same financial constraints or issues in the last couple of years that you all have had.
They have not. You're absolutely correct.
So if we could find a way to have this applied to the independent loggers, that I don't know if we could find that way, but that would be a better use of public money is what I'm thinking.
It absolutely is, and I think there's already precedence for that when the original tax exemptions were put into law in Vermont back in 2017 and 18, and the language under what is Section 1 of the bill now and Section 3 was put in statute for timber harvesting. You'll actually note in Section 3, there was specific language that's in statute now that had the tax department publish guidance relating to the application of this exemption. That actually didn't exist for DMV. So that's why we've asked for it to be put in here. So having that guidance is critical so that can be done. You don't want confusion, you want specificity, you want accountability. So we're completely in favor of that.
Interesting. Okay, thank you.
Sure. And the last thing I just wanted to respond to quickly was, I know you mentioned road utilization and road taxes. So my understanding is that Vermont also has fuel taxes, correct? On-road diesel and on-road gasoline, correct? And does that funding go to roads and bridges into your highway fund?
Yes, it does. And that's
Okay, so
part of the calculation.
yeah, so the logging companies, even if they had a tax exemption on the purchase of equipment, they are still going to be paying that fuel tax, and we are not advocating in any way, shape, or form to remove that fuel tax. Just so you know.
Hopefully you
Okay. All right. Okay. So I think hopefully that answers the questions that you had, Senator Harrison and Senator White. Did I miss anything?
No, that was basically what, I just wanted to make sure that you had an opportunity to hear you, because that branch was really
No,
interesting.
it's still a fundamental issue,
Well,
but
yeah,
Senator
I
Frank.
post that, but, Mike needs to listen to what he said about this issue.
Okay.
I think, do you have a question, Pat?
No.
I think
sorry.
we're done,
Oh, I kept thinking.
there aren't any more questions, so thank you, Dana.
Sure. Again, thank you for time. Would you like for me to work with Mr. O'Grady on those other small language changes?
I think he's already being contacted to
Okay.
about this, and I think if he has questions, you should expect next week sometime him to contact you.
Okay. Sounds good. Very good. Thank you very much. Enjoy your much needed break.
Thank you.
Enjoy, man.
All right.
Person's different.
One more thing.
Yeah, we still have Stan Kate at 11.
Any cases? I'll be right back.
Hi, Glenn, do you want me to? I love this top. Thank you.
Yep. Sure enough.
But stay when you're coming back.